Hi, this is Eli Ochiltree of the SnoKing Beekeepers Association, and this is the October 18th monthly meeting. And we are going to mainly talk about the conference, the Washington State Beekeepers Association conference that was held on the 7th and 8th. So Saturday and Sunday, about 10 days ago. Then we want to make sure we give everybody a chance to ask questions, anybody who wants to. We promised Q&A, but I'm seeing more experienced people right now than inexperienced. So, and some of you I know went. So Michael Duncan might say something, and Pat I know had a favorite speaker to talk about. I had some that I thought were interesting. We won't get the recordings for the conference. Probably we might get them in time for the November meeting, except the November meeting is already scheduled for Bree Price, the honeybee outreach coordinator that was hired a couple months ago by Washington State University as part of the funding and the Washington State Pollinator Task Force Initiative, which was put into law, and I'll mention it quickly in what we're doing under announcements. There's always announcements when you come to a meeting. But I'm thinking maybe we just want to talk about the conference, and maybe the newer people will sign on later. Everybody okay with that? This is your chance to say something. If it's not, okay. If we're going to go ahead and talk about the conference, one thing I did do was make up a list of who was there at the conference. And maybe people, let me see. If I do a slideshow, I can put up, okay, I'm screen sharing, slideshow from current slide. Oh, it didn't work. Okay, never mind. I don't know why that didn't work. No. I'm going to end show here because I didn't do that right. I was going to start from this one. Okay. Yes, it worked. Tech has worked again. Okay, so I don't know if you can all arrange your screens if you'd rather see more or less of this and see more faces instead. I know I have to arrange mine if I want to see more faces. Okay. We had all these different people speak. Tom Seeley is the Tom Seeley of honeybee democracy, Darwinian beekeeping. And then we had Megan Milbreth that I know has done a lot of kind of smaller beekeeper friendly such stuff. And then there was a woman, Emily Passarelli, who spoke on the program to teach beekeeping in the correctional centers. And she talked about Washington, I think. I didn't see that one. I'm waiting for the recordings, which I think, like I said, won't come out until at least probably November. And then we already have someone speaking in November. So if we can get a chance to get screenshots from the recordings, it'll probably be December before we can put it into a meeting. But what's interesting about that she was asked to speak is that most of the certificates that WASBA issues are actually to inmates of the correctional centers in Oregon and Washington. I was surprised to find that out. I found that out at the board meeting following the conference. And we're talking hundreds of certificates per year. And then there's Katie Lee.
That is kind of the definition of a captive audience.
What? You're funny. But they really appreciate it. It's something to put on your resume. It didn't just sit there for however long you were in. So, and it's kind of a good transition. So I'm sure she spoke on how important it was. And at the board meeting, Ellen Miller spoke on how important it was. Okay, then there was this Nathan Reed, who is employed by, as I understand it, Dalen Animal Health, who developed the AFB, the American Foul Brood Vaccine, air quotes on vaccine. It's not a vaccine in the sense we know, and that's why his talk is labeled transgenerational immune priming, I think is what it was, TGIP. And what he's talking about is this vaccine, air quotes. Then there was another person who does represent a company. I don't mean to downplay these people, but you kind of have to understand that, and some of them have outstanding backgrounds in beekeeping, but they have to make money too. Erica Shelley is CEO, I guess, of Best for Bees. She started that in like 2010 or 11. Jeff Ott, you might know. I kind of been going through this to make sure you understand. These are people you might know. Beekeeping Today podcast. If you haven't listened to it, it's worth a listen. He's located in Oregon, and he's on the WASBA board right now. Garrett Slater was the one I was most interested in because I've been looking for a long time on something about genetics. And he is looking at the drone fertility angle of genetics, which we often neglect drones, and they are half the genetics equation. We do need to understand how they transmit the genes from their mother queen onto the next generation. Seth Smith, he's a local beekeeper up there in Skagit Valley. You might have gotten some nukes and packages from him. Chris Looney is WSU and WSDA, and she spoke on the Northern Giant Hornet and is actually employed at the Olympia Entomology Lab, but I don't think that's particularly beekeeping. Entomology in Washington State is huge for agricultural pests, that kind of entomology. Japanese beetle or whatever. Jerry Hayes, you might recognize that name if you read your American Bee Journal. He did the question and answers classroom section. I think he retired from that, and a lot of other things. I'm just giving you the highlight of what I think you would remember about people. Tim Lawrence. You see his name around. He and Sue Kobe are actually married. I don't think that really affects either one of their careers particularly, but he's out at the WSU Extension, Camino, and I think Whidbey Island Extension office, working out of there. And then he and Sue, I think, live on Whidbey Island. And Sue runs the $1,500 insemination workshop. Okay, but it's an international workshop. It's where I think a lot of Washington State University's heart really lies in beekeeping, is in the international commercial scale recognition area. And Debbie Langley Boyer of AZ Hives, and she started a new club, Belfair and Beyond Beekeepers, in case you're looking for a bee club in that area. Dawn Beck. Dawn Beck was on the board. I don't know if she's still staying on the board, but she was really active in Puget Sound Beekeepers, the Skagit Valley Beekeepers, and she did a wonderful talk on fat bees. So I wanted to, and then
one other thing, by the way, Jeff Ott, he was in the master's class that I was in with University of Montana.
Yeah. A lot of these people, I didn't even try to do PhDs and master. Dawn is doing her second master. She did the University of Montana. Now she's doing Cornell. So some of these people would be great contacts if you ever wanted to know something about them. Okay, then these were their talks, shortened. Some of the titles were much longer. But Tom Seeley was into his nature-based beekeeping. Sometimes gets called Darwinian beekeeping. And then Megan Milbreth talked about dead outs and like whether or not to reuse the comb. Passarelli, of course, was on that correctional center use of our beekeeping program, WASBA's beekeeping program. Then do you replace your queen or not, basically, and why would you or would you not replace your queen after a year, 2 years, how many years? That was Katie Lee. And then the Nathan Reed, that's the guy who works for the company that created the vaccine for queens for American foul brood. Erica Shelley was talking about techniques and technologies. Again, she's a bee supply company, not as a put down, but that's going to be her emphasis. And Jeff Ott, I missed that, what the technology was. I wonder if he talked about like broodminder or what he talked about. So if somebody saw that, I'm hoping somebody will say here. Garrett Slater's the one I would like to talk on later. I want to read, I got like 10 of his papers off the internet as soon as I listened to him talk. And Seth Smith, I would like to hear how he scaled up queen production, because he's pretty scaled up. I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of hives he has. Giant hornets, I don't know, but we did learn some stuff from giant hornets. When an invading insect comes in to a new area, does it behave the same way it did in its old habitat? For example, they found they were in trees here, not in the ground, which I can believe because they would probably drown in the cold, wet ground around here. Jerry Hayes was a funny talk. Michael Duncan, maybe he'll tell us about that one because I didn't make it to that, but he said it was really funny. Bias in beekeeping. Drones, again, is interesting because we've neglected them so much. Debbie speaks on AZ hives a number of different places. So if you recognize the name Langley Boyer, that's why. And Sue Kobe. If you talk about queen workshops and such and artificial insemination, Sue Kobe is the name that comes up. And Dawn Beck, I really want a recording of her talk. It was a really great talk. Everybody's talking about fat bees and not explaining to you what fat bees are. And her talk explained it really well. So I hope we can get a lot of these on recording. So I should stop talking and let people say what they saw. If there's somebody on here, anybody want to go first? You had a favorite on this list of speakers?
Yeah, Eli, I will talk about Tom Seeley if you want to know.
Yes, great.
I
I saw you taking the notes. I was sitting next to you and saying, wow, she's taking good notes.
I was really fascinated by his talk, and it was basically about natural beekeeping. He is a professor at Cornell University, but he's been studying bees for 50 years, and he has done so many demonstrations and experiments that he has some definite ideas about why we don't really need to treat for varroa, how the bees can survive without that. And he explained how they lived in the wild. They they stay in very small holes in the trees that are about the size of a one deep. Just they stay small. They live about 15 feet up off the ground. They only have one opening, not two, just one, and it's very small, 3 square inches. And they stay far apart. He says they're about 6/10 of a mile apart, and that's part of the reason why they don't have a lot of drift and the pathogens don't drift from one hive to another. And let's see. So he started all this back in like 78, and he studied the wild hives in New York. But then along came Varroa, and when was that? 93. So he went back because he thought those wild hives would all be dead. Turns out they were just as many hives as were before, even though he knows some of them died out because he studied their genes, the genetic differences, and they did evolve and they became more Varroa resistant on their own. So he has some specific thoughts. I would love to be able to do this here, but I can't here in Marysville. We don't have room. But he says keep your best bet is to get wild caught queens, or to get queens that have not been treated with Varroa chemicals. And listen, he did so many experiments on this. The queens that were treated for Varroa did not survive as well as the others. It was kind of amazing. So he says, keep bees that are adapted to your location, like buy local queens or rear your own, and especially get ones from a wild colony if you can. And he says, keep them in small hives, one deep, and then use a queen excluder and have one Western. And they do swarm. See, they're going to swarm, but he says that's part of what helps control the Varroa, of course, the brood break. And then he said, keep your hives as far apart as possible. So like he said, in the wild, they're about a half a mile apart. I know that's impossible for us, but 10 to 30 yards, he said, would be great. And it prevents that drift, drone drift and pathogen drift. And then he said, oh, the natural hives in trees, the bees totally cover the sides and the floor and all around the hive with propolis. And he said you should put propolis collection screens on the side of your hives, and that helps waterproof and it provides antibacterial properties. I want to try that. That sounded interesting. And then he said to keep 10 to 20% of drone comb, and this is maybe over my head, but he says that somehow you have the lowest mite count with that quantity of drone. And he said to use insulation, at least an inch and a half of insulation all around, even in the summer. He said the trees that they have their hives in are anywhere from 4 to 12 inches thick with bark, and they're very protected in there. And of course, the last thing he said was rear queens from your survivor colonies. So he wrote the book. He recommends the book, The Lives of Bees. He's written 5 books and gotten quite a few awards for them too. But the last one he wrote, The Lives of Bees, he recommends. Eli, do you have any more suggestions about that talk?
That's a lot. I think I don't suppose you want to write that up and put it in a newsletter. A lot of these talks were really good. This was far better than last year's. The talks were so much better. The quality was so much better and so much more appropriate to small scale beekeepers.
Yeah.
The drone population thing. People who've been taking all their drones out with drone trapping and trying to get all of them out. You can't ever get all of them out. The bees will raise drones if they want drones. But doing whole frames of drone trapping the mites under the capped brood. Actually, there's some interesting research on that. And even adult drones are more attractive, not just drone brood. Zach Lamas has actually, LAMAS, has actually shown that. And because of that, what he's saying is he saw it. And I don't know, I would never have noticed it, but he saw it already. And they know that the drones, as long as they're in the hives, before they get kicked out, they form like a cushion. They sort of sponge up some of those mites. The mites stay on them. But when the drones aren't there anymore, then all those mites go onto the workers, and we see that big zoom in population in late summer, fall. So that's what he's saying, and it matches what Zach Lamas has said too. There was so much in that talk. Wow. A lot of things. Yeah, thanks, Pat, because I knew you were taking great notes. Anybody else have a favorite? Who else was there? Michael, you ready? You took great notes. I know you did.
Yeah, how can you hear me with this microphone?
Great.
Is it okay? Okay. I didn't get a response on your email. We were late chatting, so I don't know how much you want me to give here. I've got a overview of the whole conference, and then I've got notes on 2 presentations and the 8 grad students presentations. So I don't know how much you want me to present here, but it'll be about 15-20 minutes if you give me the go ahead.
I think so. I think everybody except we already volunteered to take questions and answer, do Q&A with the newer people. So I think we're okay to go on until close to the end of the meeting. So that would be great if you'd like to take over, Michael.
Yeah, this will be a little bit here. You've already got a nice graphic, the slides on all the presenters. So that actually takes out the presentation section that I have here. So that helped quite a bit. So what I gave for East Jefferson was an overview of the conference, and I touched on 4 things. The first one was WASBA. Now, SnoKing here, most of Eli's members, I think, know who Washington State Beekeepers are. The second thing was the conference presentations, and Eli's already given a nice overview of what those were, but I'll touch on two of them. And then the third thing that I gave a review on was the booths, the clubs, and the vendors that were available there at the club. And the fourth thing that I'll touch on is the networking, the personal contacts, basically the human resource side of the conference, and the value of that as attending it. So the first thing, for those who don't know who WASBA is, Washington State Beekeepers, it's the state beekeeping organization, umbrella organization that any clubs can join. Membership as a club level is $1 per member. For those, especially with Eli teaching the classes, your membership comes with your classes. But if you're not taking a class the following year, you'll need to, if you want to continue membership, you need to get on there and pay your membership and join. It's $30 annually. Benefits. At the club level, you get on the directory so people can find you as a club. Where WASBA is trying to put together a speaker pool so that we can draw on local and regional speakers and to have them in our meetings. And also they provide educational material for our classes. And so on a personal level, again, the classes, certification manuals, and it's access to a broad depth of information and knowledge. So there's actually some good benefits for being a member in WASBA, both personally and as a club. WASBA supports WSU through bee research, and they also give grants to grad students and for honeybee research. There was 8 that were showcased there. And I'll back up in a bit and do a quick overview of those. All of the research was relevant to the home beekeeper. So it was really a lot of information overload actually. But the grad students all gave research that helps with survivability of bees. The conference dinner, we had an auction and raised almost $12,000 for these grad students grants. So it was a good time. They had the students up there parading around like Vanna White, holding up the auction items while the auctioneer was bidding them up the bids. Our table actually bought about a $600 German chocolate cake for our dessert table. I contributed about $10 to that. Everybody else was putting hundreds in. But anyways, it was a good time, good fundraiser. Eli touched on the prison outreach that WASBA is involved in, and they're working with Washington and Oregon prisons. This was a pretty involved program until COVID, and it sort of got shut down. So now that COVID's over, they're picking back up again. And I know that Sandy Fanara with the West Sound Bees, she's been involved with the Purdy Women's Prison, and she's picked up 2 additional prisons that she's working with on a personal level and involving the club in. They're also involved with a program, Hives for Heroes. So there's a vet program that works with giving vets job skills and helping them to reintegrate into the workforce and bringing them in as commercial beekeepers and supporting them, those that work through the program. And they usually put them, match them up with a commercial beekeeper for a season. And then if they still want to be commercial beekeepers, then they work with getting them up and into business. Members, clubs and members both can participate in any of those programs, either at the club level or as individually. WASBA actually kind of put a call out for anybody who wants to participate to get a hold of WASBA, and the prisons are always needing mentors and people that can come in and talk and share bees with that captive audience that Ty was talking about. The second thing I was going to touch on was the conference presentations. Eli outlined those quite well and gave a good overview on those. I do want to say on the science track, all of the presenters in the science track were PhDs, and I'm going to age myself a little bit here, but all those girls are in their 30s and 40s and had quite the youthful college exuberance. The talks were fun. They were geared towards the beekeeper. There was not hardly any terminology or anything that went over anybody's heads. They were just very down to earth, good hands-on beekeeping presentations. And so I recommend them for anybody. It's like they made the presentations fun. They were extremely informative. During the conference, all of the presenters had oversized name badges on with their names, their presentations, and all of them were very accessible. So if you had any questions, anything you wanted to know more about their presentations, they all made themselves accessible and were very willing to sit and talk with anybody that wanted to talk bees. We also had a panel discussion with all of the presenters up there. A bunch of them got up there, and also an additional time for going over the presentations. I'm going to go through the other steps here, and then I'm going to back up and highlight a couple of the presentations. So the third thing was the booths. All the club, any WASBA affiliated club had the opportunity to have a free table there and get one free ticket for a person to man that table as a club. There was only about 6 clubs that actually took advantage of that at the conference. And I think they were very well attended. I know Eli was smoozing people quite a bit there and talking, about her club, and we kind of rotated at her table and helped her out so we could all try to catch the presentations that we really wanted to get into. There was lots of vendors there. I had already mentioned to Tony about Apame Hive, Larry O'Connor with West Press with his books, Beekeeping Essentials, Queen Essentials, all of the stuff that he produces. Him and his wife were there. A good opportunity to look at these books before you actually make a purchase. So that was available. There was, a company for glassware, for bottling honey. There was about 3 companies that were selling woodenware, bee suits. Les Scott, he's in on our club here quite a bit. He was there. All total, there was probably about 12 vendors that were represented there at the conference. WSU was there with their club, booth, and then their American Bee Organization as well. So it was a good opportunity to really see who's who in bees and a lot of local resources. So the fourth thing was the networking and personal contact. And again, myself working with Eli, getting my journeyman and working towards masters. I've spent some time with chatting back and forth with Ellen Miller and Don Beck, which runs the outreach program, the President Outreach Program, and several of these people that I've emailed a lot and had phone conversations with. It was a chance to get to shake hands and meet people that on a personal level rather than just through email and the internet. So I found that quite valuable, and we had a lot of good conversations. It was good for networking because talking about research projects and stuff, and then they were able to direct me to some of the grad students that were working on similar things, and it was just a good chance to network. Also between clubs, so at a club level and as a member level, I had 2 commercial beekeepers come up and introduce themselves that were keeping bees in Discovery Bay that I had no knowledge about. Neither of them knew either one, but there was people who knew me from the bee clubs and the classes and stuff, and they came up and introduced themselves. So it was a real good networking opportunity. The conference gave plenty of time between every 2 sets of presentations for social time to chat, network, etc. And then I would say there's probably wasn't a meal that I sat by myself that somebody either came and sat with me or I saw somebody else that I was able to sit with. And again, the socialization, chatting bees, and talking about the presentations and stuff was really as much of a benefit to the conference as the presentations themselves. I do want to mention the food was great. The banquet dinner, we had a good prime rib. They also served a glazed chicken breast. There was a vegetarian dish with all the trimmings. We had a mead tasting bar there. So those that wanted to taste mead, that was available. The conference, the WASBA conference, was $150. For me, it was a little bit of a stretch. And then the room, they gave group rate on the room. So a double room was like $117 with tax and everything was about $140. So for those who are looking to go next year, that was kind of, you could be saving your nickels and getting ready to put money aside to be able to attend the conference. The dates for it next year are going to be October 5th and 6th. And unless the east side comes up with a better venue, we're going to be having it back here in Olympia in 2024. They've got until January to come up with that. So Alan Woods, the president's going to pretty much lock it in January. So we'll have the conference here on the west side again. So I would encourage all of the members to really take advantage of it. Like Eli said last year, it probably wasn't as great, but this year it was a real good conference. And you can't, with 14 presentations, again, you can only go to 7 of them. It would take you a year at our club level to be able to get that level of information and presentations that one a month by being able to bring in a speaker and have their presentations. And here we had 2 days of really information overload. So once the recordings come out, that's going to give us a good study resource to go back on. If you are a WASBA member and you got the newsletter, and actually Eli's given the names and stuff here, you can go back, and this will, I believe, is recorded. So you could go back to look up their names on YouTube and stuff. And I think a lot of their presentations are going to be available either at other clubs or through the universities that they represent. So it'd be a good sort of a research for people that pick the topics that you're interested in and be able to hunt these people up and still be able to go back and watch the presentations, even if you didn't catch the conference. That was my conference overview. I'm going to catch the grad students first, and then I'm going to go to the dealing with dead outs, because I think that's one that most of our beginning and intermediate beekeepers would probably benefit the most. And the 8 grad students, basically they had to give up and give us a talk on what they did with our scholarship money that we gave them last year, and the ones that were reapplying for additional scholarships for this year. And this will be fairly quick. There was one young, and again, these are all they're just kids, dang, in their 20s. Jack Miller, he was introducing a new strain of bee, Apis palminella, Apis mellifera palminella, and they're having trouble with bees in apple orchards and nutritional problems and disease problems and whatnot. So he's looking at crossing Caucasian queens with this bee that is from the UK or EU area that's actually palminella that's for working with apples and in orchards. And so he's doing his research on that. Another young fellow, David Igbag Delora, testing and efficiency of OAV toxicity. He's actually started his own company and developing a product called Beora X Son. And he gave 2 presentations actually, but he's looking at trying to develop, or he is developing Beora or oxalic acid treatments similar to the Formic Pro, where they'll go in as a strip. He's They're strong enough to actually take the mites out from under the cappings, mild enough not to damage brood, and can be used with honey supers on, and he's in the process of trying to get FDA approval. Good luck on that one, but he's actually pursuing that. It's a 56-day treatment. He's working with a 40 colony test base, and he was looking comparing with Apivar, standard OAV, and then he had a no treatment hive as sort of a base. Number 3, there was a Riley Reed. He was looking at improving crop isolation. So for the commercial beekeepers with large monocropping, they're finding the bees are having problems with poor feed and not getting a varied enough food. So he's looking at feed supplementals and whatnot. It'd basically be the same as going and eating at McDonald's every night for your the whole summer. You just don't get the nutritional balance. So he's researching that. I missed the young fellow that did the presentation on blueberry pollination. Again, this was geared more towards commercial, but they're finding that bees that are put on large acreages of blueberries for pollination are coming up with a high rate of European foul brood. And again, poor nutrition through the pollen and nectar of the blueberries. So, and a soil microbe. So that he's doing research on that. We had another presenter, and I missed his name, doing a historical outlook on Breora in the Pacific Northwest. This is probably the only one I saw that wasn't at the beginning hands-on beekeeping level, but looking at DNA testing and genotyping of mites. And again, that I wanted to highlight it just to let people know there is a lot of work going into trying to solve this mite problem. The David Bagdalora, again, he presented again, basically highlighting his company that he's trying to start with this new oxalic acid product. We had one PhD on there, Kirsten Rithy. She did a talk on queen reproduction, AI, artificial insemination or instrumental insemination versus natural queen mating, multiple, single mating with AI versus multiple drones, and the effects that they had on the queens and stuff. So those who are interested in queen rearing, that was a good talk. At our level at the hobby, we're not going to be doing that. The last one was on small hive beetles as an emerging pest in Washington, and they are showing up. I've seen them myself. They've come in with pollen patties that I've bought before, but they're seeing small hive beetles showing up more and more in Washington, and they're concerned about Western Washington, particularly having survivability of these making it through the winter, because with our drying, with climate change, for those our droughty weather, they don't survive the winters with rain or a lot of cold. So Eastern Washington, they're not concerned about them, but they said the conditions are about right here in Western Washington for them to start to becoming a pest. All of our courses, our beginner, intermediate, and journeyman, do have things on hive beetles. We basically gloss over them because they really haven't been a pest here in Washington yet, but it is something for us to keep an eye out for. So that was the 8 grad students and what they were working on with the money that we've given them. Do I still have enough time to keep going, Eli?
Yeah, I think so. That'd be great.
Okay, so on the presentations, the ones that I think were a couple of them here that I took notes on that are will benefit the basic beekeepers was the dealing with the dead outs with Megan Milgrath from Michigan State University, and I haven't gone through it to try. to see if she's presented somewhere else where I can get access to her stuff. Most of these presentations went so fast, it was hard to get good notes, and the slides moved pretty quick. So there's a lot of gaps in the information that we have here. So again, it's really just an overview. So anyways, she was looking at risk with dealing with dead outs, equipment, and basically she said good equipment, early setup in the preseason, and dead outs. She was talking about look, listen, smell, temperature if you have a flare gun, hunting for dead outs, and dealing with them right away, getting them cleaned up, scraping the bees and everything into the compost pile versus field cleaning. She's done quite a study on this. It just wasn't an observation as a beekeeper, but this is a research project that she'd worked on. Dead bees, she said, are not a big risk for pathogen spreading because the risk factor was the infection dose versus the amount of exposure. So really, you had to have quite a lot of exposure to the pathogens before it became a risk from contaminating other hives. She did recommend scorching bottom boards with a torch, and discard excess food. That was one that she didn't recommended it to not use capped honey. Actually, open nectar more so than capped honey. But again, if you use it in the same apiary, again, the risk factor goes down because those bees are probably already exposed to whatever diseases that were in your hive that's only 2 feet or 5 feet away from your hive. So if you do use excess honey from a dead out, use it in the same yard. You don't want to spread it to a different yard or risk having a disease spread to another yard, and that way you can keep an eye on it. Dealing with equipment right away reduces robbing, reduces wax moth infestation. She touched on American foul brood, and again, Washington State still recommends burning those. Really, most of the takeaway was sanitation and rotating frames out. So 10 to 20% of the frames rotating every year. I know personally myself, every hive has to make at least 2 new frames every year, preferably 4. So that keeps a good clean frames in the hive. Let's see here, looking at my notes. She was saying that old equipment, old hives, as well as the frames, actually had higher rates of mite counts than new equipment. So she also recommended rotating your boxes out as they start getting a little scuzzy and beat up and whatnot. And if you don't, again, it was a cost of a replacement versus the risk. And again, she recommended culling boxes out, using a torch to scorch the insides of them. She talked on bleach disinfectant with a question mark. And overall, it's pretty poor. And bleach washing equipment. I use commercial fish and cleaning fish holds, and bleach, you have to have at least a 20-minute contact period for it to be effective against bacteria and stuff. So I use bleach on my bottom boards and stuff, but I wet it down really good and then go do something else and let it set. And then I come back and wet it again and then let it set some more. And then I come back and really scrub them and then prop them up out in the sunshine for a day or 2 before I put them back on the hive. So you can use bleach, but it has to have a longer contact. Again, she recommended scorching with a torch. And she said one of the better ways was actually the hot wax dip. So if you have access to the hot wax dip, and I know there's somebody that was online with either West Sound Bees a couple of years ago that put together a tank and was offering hot wax dipping for anybody who was wanting it. So it is locally available. Just have to, I don't have the notes on his name and where it was at. So that was kind of the overall view on dead outs. research. The bias in beekeeping, and that was on the hobbyist track. Jerry Hayes was the editor of Bee Culture magazine. Quite a personal history that involved bees and the colleges he worked at, the Baton Rouge Research Center. Basically, what he did is he took the bee survey that it's a nationwide survey, but we participate in it locally in Washington. And I think Eli's got the name. It might be Larry O'Connor down in Oregon, or one of the guys down there that is overseeing it here in our area on dead outs, the reasons for dead outs, and percentages, all that kind of stuff, and how our hives are surviving. And he went by point through the whole thing, and pretty much, I mean, he had us in the aisle laughing the whole time because it was pretty funny how he took something that was kind of serious and, you know, like, oh, gee, you know, we didn't feed Johnny for a week and a half and he died, you know. So you got to feed your bees, you got to treat for diseases. Some of the takeaway from him was sharing and accessing information. And that helps reduce losses because the more that we network together as our clubs, within our clubs and between clubs, the better our bees are going to do as we share information and educational outreach and opportunities. He said the worst thing that happened in beekeeping was the internet. And because every third-year beekeeper thinks they're an expert, they put up a YouTube channel, and there's just so much misinformation being spread that it's really a detriment to beginning beekeepers that are want to try every new thing, or you know, the natural beekeeping in the Ozarks or whatever, and they just at a local level we have to try to mitigate some of that and get people to learn how to take care of bees first before they branch out into alternative hives and alternative methods. So yeah, he said the internet was one of the worst things that happened to beekeeping. The average loss rate, now he was looking nationwide, and our Washington numbers are actually a little higher, 45.2%. And I think in Washington it's about 47% of hobbyist beekeepers lose their bees. Of that 45%, he said 52% of those did not treat for mites. So probably the biggest killer of bees among our beginning beekeepers is not treating for mites, period. The others are nutrition and wet bees in the winter. As far as the mite treatments, he was saying that Apiguard was the most effective with the lowest bee kill. So there's sort of a balance there between oxalic acid vapor. It is effective, but it doesn't take out the mites under the brood. But of the stronger treatments, that he said that was the one that was the most effective with the lowest bee kill. So Eli has a lot to say about those things, and I'd let her, as far as the mite treatment stuff, talk about the difference. And she just did with her journeyman class. So anyways, how to be a better beekeeper is to be informed. And he recommended Honeybee Health Coalition, which I know Eli is also promoted. They've got a really good booklet out on treatments, feeding, supplements, that sort of thing. His closing comment was, everybody is entitled to their own opinion, but not their own facts. So just because you have an opinion about something doesn't mean it's a fact. And people, you know, basically you need to be responsible enough to research out some of the information that you're being told to find out whether it's true or whether it's just somebody's opinion about bees. So anyways, that's what I've got, Eli, and I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Wow, you covered lots, so much already. Wow. Maybe we don't need to do a December session after we get the recordings. Any questions or comments? Because that was wonderful. That was a wonderful synopsis. And there was so much, this was so much better than last year. Um,
I had a question. I don't know if you know the answer, but just in your thing, you said Washington had a high amount of dead outs compared to the other states, correct? Was that correct?
Slightly higher. Yeah, the national average is like 45%, and Washington is about 47%.
And what is the cause of most of those dead outs? Like, what were they caused by? Do you happen to know?
52% were caused by not treating for mites.
52% was mine. Okay.
Your number one killer of bees right there is not treating for mites. And then nutrition is the second. And our little saying, wet bees are dead bees. So again, here with winterization, and condensation in the hive, and Eli's got several good presentations on YouTube on winterization. We didn't go over it real in depth this year, and basically reinvent the wheel, but yeah, treating for mites, nutrition, and winterization to get keeping your bees dry over the winter are the best things you can do to keep your bees alive.
Okay, because I was trying to figure out, would that increase be just because Washington weather is hard to overwinter? There might have been an increase, or was it actually directly related? Were the mites a big enough factor in that actually caused more dead outs versus our normal winterization trouble?
I think part of the problem is environmental, because we do have more moderate temperature and climate here that's more favorable for the mites. But I think the other is, as a state, and I haven't done any research to check numbers, but we've got a lot of beekeepers. We're training a lot of having a lot of beginning beekeepers and intermediate beekeepers come through our clubs. So I think just the sheer volume of beekeepers that we have at the beginner level is contributing to that number being a little bit higher. And that's where Eli, with the ongoing teaching the classes, and my emphasis with East Jefferson, trying to get the classes, having people that do our beginner moving on into the WASBA advanced classes, helping them get their bees through the winter. My personal loss on bees, I've been keeping bees 5 years. I've got my Journeyman, and my loss rate runs between 14 and 17%. Out of 30 hives, I generally lose 3, maybe 4. One or two of those might be a nuke. So I've got my personal loss rate is very low on a percentage basis. So I've been doing pretty good at keeping bees alive, but it's treating for mites, keeping them fed, keeping them dry.
yeah, that's what they say, dry, fed, and treated. And then I always add on, and do no harm. Don't do anything experimental unless you're willing to accept a possible loss. So dry, fed, and treated, just like Michael said. That study you're referring to, is that the PNW, the one that Dewey Karen out of OSU, Oregon State University? He's now in charge of it, right? That one?
Yes.
Yeah. It has a lot of self-selection bias in it. It's not a large number of hives. People volunteer to respond to the survey. So you might get more people who are responding because they are losing their hives, whereas people who are kind of complacent and they're overwintering pretty well year to year, I don't know if they bother to fill it out. So there's a lot of what they call selection bias in that. But it's an interesting survey. And also, what's the reason for a dead out? It's whatever the beekeeper marks down, because nobody else is there. And all hives get wet and sloppy inside once the bees are dead. So I'm never sure if they really died because they were wet inside before they died. And starvation, if the hive gets robbed out after the fact, I'm never sure if people know. Varroa is number one from what I can gather.
So there's no type of group that comes around if you have a dead out to just like oversee and record why versus just telling them that there was a dead out?
No.
Okay.
We're kind of on our own, and that's part of the problem, because when you're on your own, as Jerry Hayes says in his talk, then you turn to the internet, because how do you connect with anyone else? and bee clubs have been really bad about connecting. Until the one good thing about the internet is all the Zoom. You can send out the newsletters by email, so people have them and can look at them maybe on their break at work. Maybe they're in transit. A lot of things, there are things that tech and the internet have helped with. And there's other things that it's really hurt, because when we got so isolated, and I think most small scale hobbyist beekeepers, they don't get a chance to talk to another beekeeper. And some meetings are very formal. This one's very casual. In some ways, that might not be what people really want. This conference, this was a great chance to do everything. As Michael was saying, you got to talk to other beekeepers. You got to actually see these people who you can find on the internet. Just about everybody on here you can probably find on the internet. And the ones that are PhDs, of course, you go to Google Scholar. And once you figure out which initial they use, if they have a distinctive last name, it's easier. Like Milbreth, you could get Garrett Slater. I downloaded like 10 free PDFs on his different papers because I was interested in that. But a lot of these, you go in to Google Scholar, you can get that. You go to YouTube. If you know how to look, you can find them. But I don't know, where do you go for good advice as a beginning beekeeper? I didn't get any. So, and we don't have a good mentoring system. Anybody who's looking for willing to mentor, speak up, you know. And actually, there's sometimes somebody close to you who needs to do some mentoring for their journeyman, or they'd really like to. It's kind of hard to put people together though, because it's hard to meet somebody. You have to kind of meet on a Facebook discussion group, or better yet, at an apiary outdoor class. Go into the outdoor classes, the workshops that are in person, but that's during the bee season when everybody's so busy. So keep trying, keep communicating, keep networking. We can do it. Now, Randy, who's on here, is this Randy Furness or Randy Green? Because Randy Green, I know, was there at the conference. I was wondering if you wanted to say anything, because I know you were there.
It's Randy Furness on.
Okay. Were you there? I don't think so, from Whidbey.
No, I wasn't. No.
Yeah, that would be too hard. Okay. Yeah, I couldn't tell from Randy's iPad. Anybody else who was at the conference? We're waiting for those recordings. There was a little bit of a screw up on especially the hobby track, as it's called. So I think they'll probably hold the recordings until they can get those re-recorded or get alternate recordings or something. But the science track, those people in that room, that audio visual was working great. Probably December will come back to, although I think Michael Duncan should just host it and just do the December meeting, because he's so good at this, at presenting the whole conference and each talk and everything.
Yeah, I was able to get notes on about 5 of the presentations, so anywhere from a page and a half to 3 pages. But yeah, I would really like to see those recordings come out so I can go back through and pick up stuff that I missed. Because, like I said before, they moved the slides along fast enough that it was hard to get, for those of us that are old-fashioned, using a pencil and paper to get adequate notes. I saw a lot of people using their cell phone cameras to take pictures of each slide, so they were able to, you know, go back and review stuff better than what some of us old duffers can do with a pencil. So kind of looking.
Yeah, I wish I'd done the cell phone thing on some of those. It went by so fast. But see, with the recordings, they'll be able to go back again and pick up on what it was, all the details. Let's see. There were, for example, Katie Lee did on her queen replacement. What was interesting about her talk was she actually talked a commercial beekeeper into taking, I think it's 240 hives, and she had 4 cohorts of 10. No, she had, 60 hives each. I think it was 4 cohorts of 60 hives each, and she could look at them and do different things and compare what she did one group to another. Usually 60 is about as many hives as they've got in the entire experiment. And that means that you don't get really good results on a lot of studies that people do. And often that's a big flaw, is you don't have that many hives that you're actually working with, because hives cost a lot of money, as we have all noticed being beekeepers. So beekeeping research outside of the lab is really expensive. Inside the lab, when they talk about lab tests for pesticides or whatever, they take like a little cup full of bees and they stick various degrees of pesticides in different little cupfuls of bees. That's not the same as like testing pesticides in a lab, which maybe we would never want to do. But that would be super expensive if you were looking at hive immunity instead of just little individual bee immunity. And we know it's different. So it was really, that was impressive about her study. For example, there were things that if you had time to watch them, you picked up what they did. I really wish I'd had a chance to see all of these. I'm waiting for those recordings.
Yeah, I had my notes open to that same presentation when you started with Katie there as well. And on the queen thing, hers was measuring the costs and benefits of keeping versus replacing year-old queens. And a couple of things that she highlighted on her talk was that older queens generally produce more honey. Your hives have a lot better honey production. However, they were also more susceptible to mites and deformed wing virus. So there was a trade-off there. But she said overall, older queens gave a better value dollar return than new queens. Now, what I follow myself personally is the Brother Adam method of requeening my hives. So I make my queens the year before, overwinter them in nukes, and then the next spring I requeen. And so those queens are fresh. They're coming into basically their second year of lay. They're in their top production, and that's when you get your high honey flow out of these queens. And then I actually make more queens and replace them about half of my queens every year and rotate them. So I've got kind of a mix of second year queens mixed in with third year queens. Generally they start petering out after 3 years. So I try to make sure I don't have any that are 2 years old or more. And she gave a real good talk on that. I mean, her talk, as far as she gave a lot of percentages and numbers. And again, she did a lot of hives in that presentation. And she did mention that summer losses on bees were mostly due to queen issues. Fall and winter losses were mostly due to mites. And then older queens do have higher mite issues. So again, the younger queens tended to have less mites and survive mite infestations better than the older queens did.
So she said you ended up kind of balancing the young queens are going to overwinter better, and the older ones are going to have higher honey production.
Yes.
Overall profitability. She was trying to figure out, okay, if you have, and she also took the cost of the queen that you bought into account too, and said that's the older queens are a little bit more profitable. And old wasn't that old. It was just the second year, right?
Correct.
Yeah, the second year she did it. The first year she wasn't sure how some of the queens were, but the second year I think she knew.
Yeah, I think her talk overall was sort of reinventing the wheel, because people who like to read or study a little bit can go back to Brother Adam's book, Beekeeping at West, and then also his one on breeding bees, because he talked quite a bit in depth about queens, their survivability, their production, and all that. So a lot of this work, I think, on the queens has already been done, at least at that level. And I still follow the Brother Adam method as far as requeening goes.
And Brother Adam, for everybody here, is a monk back in the UK in rather cold, windy area the south of England. And that is, you're talking 50, 60 more years ago. He's doing all this work and research and developing the Buckfast bee. If you ever hear Brother Adam's name, it would probably be the Buckfast bee, named after Buckfast Abbey. And he went around collecting bees. In those days, they couldn't just take the semen from the drones and ship it in liquid nitrogen. He had to go and get bees and bring them back to the UK to breed them. So he put in some Italian blood and some other blood into the Buckfast bee, and I think he took the native black bee of England as well, and he bred everything together. And then he was really looking for resistance to what is now considered to be the tracheal mite. At the time, they didn't know what caused Isle of Wight disease. Back in 1922, when the United States closed its borders to all imports of adult bees, unless you got a special permit from the USDA. So that's the history of Brother Adam, the Buckfast bee, the 1922 quarantine, which then when 2008 colony collapse disorder really hits, people say, oh, we have a genetic bottleneck, we need to bring in diversity. And that leads to artificial insemination, Sukobi going around to all kinds of areas around the Mediterranean, the Caucasian Mountains, even up somewhat into the highlands, like in the Caucasian Mountains, and then a little bit farther east, picking up some more strains. Because we needed diversity. And then actually Garrett Slater, he said one interesting thing in his talk that I said, I have to read some more. He said, we may be getting too diverse. We may not be concentrating enough on traits that we can reasonably get, and which ones do we want? Anyone else? Because if no one else has questions or anything, it's time for announcements. I was teasing everybody about announcements before the meeting. Okay, it's time for announcements. If you don't have anything to say, we're going to announcements here. Announcements. Okay, so what do I have here on announcements? Oh, on announcements. All these things we're talking about would make great articles for newsletters, and I am pushing this winter in all these cold, dark, damp days and nights. Why don't you earn something towards if you've already earned apprentice, you can start working on Journeyman and you can write articles for newsletters such as SnoKing. But actually, probably any bee club needs articles to beef up their newsletters and talk about something interesting. And Sandy put in the first part of her pesticide hive die out article in this last newsletter. And it was actually kind of an easy read narrative. You're right there looking inside the hive with her. And then she's going to give us the second part of it later. But that's the kind of thing that earns you a couple of units. So let me see. I think I need to move this over. Can everybody, I think I have to hide some of you. Okay, so if you go to wasba.org and you look at the service possibilities for earning your 35 service credits per journeyman for final certification as a journeyman, you can do a lot of things. But the first three are the ones that really interest me and I'm promoting. Giving presentations. For example, what Michael just did, he just gave you a good half-hour presentation about the state conference. That is a beekeeping or related topic to a beekeeping group. Doesn't even have to be a beekeeping group. Can be your preschool even or your school. And if you don't think preschoolers count, you just try to keep the interest of preschoolers. Yeah, it counts, trust me. We always need help teaching beginner beekeepers. So, and other clubs too. In SnoKing, we really want you to have taken the academic part of Journeyman before you teach beginner. Technically, that's not required, but I really think you'll feel more confident if you take on teaching or co-teaching, if you'd like to just teach part of the course. But the articles, for example, this conference, your favorite researcher, your favorite YouTube blogger or whatever, you could write a really good article, a review on that, and say why you're interested. What do they have that maybe other bloggers or And some people are just, they like even have subscriptions to their channel. They have channels and they are producing fairly regularly. Bob Binney, David Burns are the most commonly known. I like Frederick Dunn, Ian Stepler up at Canadian Beekeepers blog. But maybe you've got somebody else, them or somebody else, and you'd like to write about them. Hey, we need those articles. And it makes really interesting reading. And if you're not a live person, some people can't talk like Michael just did. That's a talent to be able to talk like that, coherently, logically, very organized, reading off your note. I mean, that's a real talent. Well, maybe you're a little shyer or you're really better with the pen. Okay, this is your chance. I don't know if we can get you a national magazine. And I don't know that you could actually local association newsletter. I would love that. Somebody want to take over the newsletter for the next year? But you only get 5 units for that. But for articles, which is a large part of writing a good newsletter, 2 units each article. Okay, I just want to put that in there. And then that was the first announcement. The next one is that the membership drawing is still on. If you pay for your renewal with SnoKing membership by November 10th. We will announce, I think it's the 15th is our monthly meeting, who the winners are. We'll actually draw them live, drum roll and everything, randomize the number of entries. But you get an entry for every shift you worked at the fair. So lots of people have earned a bunch of entries there. And 1 for paying your dues by November 10th. And the prizes. That's why there's a picture of Walt with he's right there behind the prize hive. Okay, we had to find a hive that had no bee smell or bee odor to take to the fair. So Man Lake donated that for a prize for our raffle or drawing, and we had to use it. But it's still unused. It's just that it had no bee smell, so it didn't attract yellow jackets and problems. And then the quilt is the other big prize. First person drawing gets to pick whatever they want. There's a bunch of smaller prizes that I need to send out in a mid-monthly newsletter because I didn't get them into this newsletter. But those are the 2 biggie ones. Handcrafted quilt. Notice the little inset with a gorgeous little crown and the queen bee on that center picture, and a single deep hive setup. Inner cover, telescoping cover, bottom board. I don't remember if the Robbins King came with it, but I'd be happy to throw one in. Next announcement. I'm not taking too long. We finally have the local honey sold by members list. Send it in to, actually, I think Heidi's volunteering to do it, right? If I put Heidi's name on that, send in. If not, send it to me and we'll get it onto the list. And if you click, we finally got this live. The click should work and take you to the document. And at least give us, if you're interested in selling your honey and having people know where you are, they say, Heidi's giving me a thumbs up. So I guess she's okay with that if I give you her email so that she can do it. And you might have other bee products. You might have pollen, propolis, hive consulting. Very few people do it, but there's a huge demand for some kind of hive hosting, hive. And if you can make it clear what it is you're offering as a service, we'll put it down and let people contact you. We have other things there on our homepage. So I hope when people are looking for nukes and packages or bee supply stores, I hope they remember to click on nukes and packages, find out who's next to you, who's near you. And I'm trying really hard to get every event onto the events calendar. So if you click on calendar up above, I just was putting on the Hive Mind, which is the beginner to intermediate discussion group, and the Journeyman's one that starts on November 1st. Okay, I'm trying really hard on this. One weird announcement. Facebook has changed its donate button policy. We are not primarily a charitable organization. We are a nonprofit. They won't let us really use the donate button. My understanding is Halloween, it disappears when the spirits are walking abroad or whatever. So anyway, it disappears. If we leave it up, they will simply reroute you to somebody else that they consider an appropriate donation. And some people wouldn't notice. So I think we're going to have to take the donate button down. We're a 501c3, but we're not primarily charity. We're more educational, networking, and somewhat a social group. What do I have here? Oh, and there were some interesting things I put on the Facebook group. Anybody who's on one of these things where something comes up that's really interesting to beekeepers or native pollinator people, this hedgerows workshop came up. I don't know if anybody's near Rochester, which is where this was actually going to, the Helsing Junction Farm. If you look it up, down Rochester. If you don't know where Rochester is, you're probably not close enough to drive there easily, but it might be worth it. Hedgerows were something I grew up with, kind of dividing fields, and they're kind of bringing them back. They're great for bird watchers and for the birds and the native pollinators, and you can even do it hands-on in Rochester, or you can do the webinar online. Oh, and things come up in your local community. If they come up, let us know. If I can get it into the newsletter on time, I will. If we can put it on the Facebook group, we can put it there. For example, Snohomish County it's over $1 million for tree equity. If you've never heard of tree equity, it's something that's known that if you don't have trees and greenery in an area, human health deteriorates in that area. There's a correlation. So it's a big push throughout the United States. There's all kinds of funding for this. And Snohomish County, there's a link here. I put it on Facebook, and I can email it if anybody needs it. There's millions of dollars available just for Snohomish County alone. So if you're in a different county, you may have another set of dollars that are available to you. Also, when we're picking those trees, couldn't we maybe do lindens grow around here? Or one of the locust trees that's not invasive, like the black locust that the bees really love, but maybe one of the other locust trees, and get those considered something for pollinator habitat, as well as it gives you greenery. And there was a bill passed through the House back, I think it's in the 2021-22 session, for public landscaping for pollinators. 25% of whatever is allocated for public landscaping on a project has to be used for native habitat. You may be able to take advantage of this in your local area if you're kind of active in your city council, county council, or commission. Keep an eye on it. Maybe you could put a word in for what you'd like to see happen in your area. Okay, we looked at that. And then I had some winterizing slides. I don't think I have anything else that's really an announcement. Oh, here's another announcement. Trophallaxis. I had to come up with a name for the Journeyman's group. The hive mind was already taken, and that is a great name. Down below on this slide, it says second Thursdays. Gina Cuff's been running that since at least May. I got it on the event calendar, so if you need to remember when it is, go to SnoKingBK.org and it'll be there. And then, but trophallaxis is for people who are taking the course, the Journeyman course, or have taken it, and upward. They're working on their Journeyman, or they already have Journeyman and Master, and would like to network, maybe share presentations, maybe test presentations on each other, maybe present for the first time to a friendly group. Okay, not that there's a bad group when you're talking about bees. Almost everybody's friendly when you're talking about sweet little vegan fuzzy honeybees, right? You're not promoting wasp culture or something like that. So we're going to start November 1st. We can change from the first Wednesday. I just had to pick a day I could do it to get us started. And then after it gets started, it may just run on its own. I don't know what people want. If they just want to socialize, network, hang out, some may want to talk about scaling up, going from hobbyist to a little bit higher scale. And there's some difficulties in that. And then others like Pat's she says it's really interesting, this natural beekeeping. What if a group in a certain area got together and maybe grafted off the queens they thought were the most successful? It might be possible to do in a certain area. I've always thought the Sky Valley area with Sultan and Gold Bar, I've always thought that area would be kind of a nice corridor in which to do something like that. But I think there's other areas. I mean, Camino Island, Whidbey Island, maybe you could start something, maybe not change overnight or anything, but you might make more progress in an area like Tom Seeley's talking about where you get some isolation. So I'm hoping people will come to that and drop by and say what you'd like, or email me. If you can't make this meeting, email me and tell me, what are you looking for? Networking, scaling up, going through a research paper at a time, going through a talk at a time, play it by ear, earn some service credits by doing the presentation that you'd like to try out. And it would be presentation to a beekeeping group. I also am advertising that I could use a little help getting our brood binders set up. And I know that Ray, who's been managing our soon to be, someday to be Sultan apiary, that she was taking this kind of data, and this is kind of interesting to see. For example, weight change here, the scale. Our hives have been dropping. This was up just through September 23rd, maybe. And you can see it's been driving. And then I think when she worked on the hive, it will spike times like that. But
It's fun. You can tell how many pounds of bees you have as foragers in a day.
yeah,
Because you can see when they depart in the day and when they come back, and you see the daily oscillations
did I
as the foragers go out.
I don't know if I had that, but I thought that's what it was. And somebody else said, no, it's honey dehydrating. Oh, I don't have it here. I thought I had another one of those, but I don't see it. Another slide. Hope
It
nobody-
wouldn't just be honey dehydrating.
Okay, yeah, that's what
There's
I'm
enough.
thinking. I'm thinking this is the foragers, every dip down here on the weight on
Yeah,
a daily basis at the same time every day. I think that's what it is.
yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, but I wasn't sure because I hadn't made sure we were on local time versus maybe Greenwich time or something. I hadn't checked that. But yeah, and you can see when there's
It keeps restoring back to the same values. You know,
Mhm.
it's like, and it's slowly increasing over time with the brood increasing over time, plus your scale, plus you're collecting honey on a daily basis. So I
Yeah. So anyway, it's interesting to see. And what's interesting about this is it only goes to like September 23rd, but you can see that the weight was going up through what I think was the knotweed flow, maybe some pollen, kind of started leveling off in the middle of September, and then this and that, and then started dropping. And if we were to look at this last month, as soon as Ray gets a chance to you have to hold your cell phone there and connect with the Bluetooth and upload the readings. I'll bet we'll see that this is dropping some more. I was going to check with her. She's taking care of it. It's wonderful of her to do that. Getting out to Sultan just seems like one of those things I never quite get out there to take care of it. So, and is Jessica that's on here also the Jessica that's there? Oh, she was here. Jessica was on here.
if you allow me to share, I'll just show you what we're seeing.
Yeah. Let me stop this share and you share what you've got because that was my announcements pretty well. I don't think I forgot anything.
I mean, it's propagating the last 90 days. I did 30. I was going to do last 90. It's propagating. Oh, let me see if I can.
Okay, but the last 30 should start to show the end of the knotweed and they start eating up their stores, which leads to one of the huge controversies: to feed or not to feed. When we're still having nights that are 50 degrees, and I know those bees are chowing down those winter stores I was counting on.
So you can see when I pulled the supers off.
Yeah, okay, there's that big drop.
Right, and then it's when I'm feeding them.
Okay, and
you can see when I feed.
Okay, so it's
So
going.
they're actually maintaining because I'm feeding them into the winter, and they have in excess of a box. And the reason is because I'm insulating them this winter, and if they're more active, I want to make sure that they have enough honey to get through.
Because they're going to eat more if they're more active, which
if that's that's not guaranteed that that's the case, but you know, given the choice, you probably want to protect them versus others. So
sort of cheap insurance. Sugar doesn't cost as much as buying bees again.
Yeah, I mean, and you don't want to kill your bees, you know, if you have the choice. So I'm leaving them run heavy with honey.
Okay, so now this is the weight change. So we have to find the zero line
Yeah.
here. And then they're still building up, up, up,
Yep.
up. Okay.
Yep.
So each, yeah,
That's what I want them to do.
okay. And then each time you go in is
6
kind of,
gallons of water and 50 pounds of sugar.
what are you mixing it in?
Like a big supersized stock pot.
Okay. Okay.
So anyway, so there's things that I'm going to take apart over time and stuff like this. I haven't, you know, when it's a mess, you can't, but then you can turn off what you don't want to see and you know, go focus in on the hives of interest and stuff. So they're getting better at their broodminder application. So anyway, that's what I thought I'd just share.
And
So.
And I'm hoping for some help. Anybody got some help this weekend? I don't know what the weather's like, though. I never know, because I've got to get my broodminder sensors back in. I gave up trying to do the broodminder when I had all these little nukes that we were constantly going into. So I want to get them back in on the 10 hives that I have now, and I want to see when they brood down and when they brood up. If I can get the sensors in, I'm so afraid to lift boxes right now. I would like to have somebody help me. And like if I'm cracking 2 boxes apart and I want to slide that brood sensor right above where the brood is now is ideal. And then you put one a little higher up. But to move the brood to the bottom, I'd like somebody to stand there with the smoker and sort of smoke them off the bottom of the frames. I'm just so worried. Queens have that tendency to dive, come to the bottom of the frame, and then you set the box down. And it's like my nightmare that I worry about. So I hate going in this late, but if anybody happens to be free to come over to Maltby, let me know. Today would have been the perfect day.
I was in my hives.
Do you want to do it tomorrow, Eli?
Seriously?
Gonna be,
Do you want to come find me? Oh, I can't. I can only do it until about 2. Yeah, but the weather.
It shouldn't take long. I mean, literally.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, you're cracking hives, dropping the sensors
just carefully.
in, and
yeah.
place them, you know, so the tails are sticking out. And
seriously available, Mike? You want to come learn? I mean, you haven't had bees yet, right? So we'll get the smoker going, get the bee suits on. And but mainly it's I need somebody, another pair of hands there, because I'm trying to ease that back on and I'm thinking, oh no, because that is the biggest reason that you're going to lose hives after you've kept them dry, fed, and treated for mites is the queen event. And messing around. And that's why they tell beginners don't mess around this late.
What time do you want me to show up in your driveway?
Well, we got to I'm hoping for the sun to come out. But sometimes as good as it's going to be about 10 o'clock or so. Text me, okay? You've got my text?
Yeah, I got your, yeah, I have your phone number. It's in the emails that you send, right?
Right. Or you can email me too. But
yeah,
once I'm outside, I don't really check the email. So text me and I'll be watching. Yeah. And that would make it a lot easier. Do have to check that I get the number written down. And this is the hardest part. Is after I get the sensor in there, do I have the correct number with the correct number hive? And then did I get the new battery into it? And then after putting the box back down, did I press the little button that turned the sensor off? And you would think this is impossible. But if there's a little bit of burr comb, if you're not a very tidy person and you didn't clean off all your burr comb, the burr comb can hit the buttons on some of the sensors and turn them off.
I haven't had a problem with that. It's actually, I mean, here's one of the, I haven't had a problem with that. But your comment about the number is a big one, because these little tails break off.
My geese eat them. My geese snack on them.
I bet they do. And so it's something to either write, you know, either on the tags that you have on the hives or something like that, so you can easily see that, because in the winter, you're not going to get into the hives to go figure, you know, to go read the number off the tag itself. So,
and I get really puzzled when the bottom broods up and the top.
Yeah, right. The other thing you can do is just take a small, thin Sharpie, not a normal width Sharpie, but a thin Sharpie, and just write it on the outside of the box. Yeah. Because that way you'll know, you know, rarely do they move around, and you can always cross it out if you don't need it. But those tabs break off. That's a design fault there.
Yeah, or you can put them all the way inside. You can just
Yeah.
but then you have to remember what it was.
Mhm.
And like you said, the Sharpie on the outside. So if somebody'd help me with the smoking, making sure the battery, the writing on the outside, and then checking after I get it in that it still works.
Or if you're really good, just get right to the Broodminder tool and write in the right details. Because once it's in the app, then you know
Mhm.
where it's at.
Yeah. Although it seems easier for me to go back to the computer and enter it than to try to do it on my phone.
Yes, I agree with you. No, that's what I do too. I write it down.
So it requires the clipboard there and write everything down. Okay, yes, Mike, that would be wonderful. Yeah, I'll
Okay.
show you the whole apiary, give you a private lesson tour of whatever. That'd be great.
Cool.
Okay, wow, I'm glad I mentioned that.
I'm going to be interested in seeing, especially if you have yours in, Eli, to
Mhm.
see what our humidities are, relatively speaking. We're not that far apart. And I'm going to run full insulation, and it'll be interesting to see the humidity and temperatures that we run over the winter.
With no upper entrance.
No upper entrance. And the whole key there is, if you're going to do no upper entrance, you have to be able to maintain a warmer temperature so you don't hit the dew point in where the brood is. Right? That's the whole argument there. Keep it above the dew point.
Well, I never worry about humidity. I only worry about condensation, because if you don't have a lot of extra space, the bees control the ventilation. As long as you have the thermal stability.
I understand.
At
But
the
you understand what the dew point is, right? The dew point is condensation point.
where it would condense inside of the hive.
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, before I forget, Paula put a note on here, which is really nice, about I saw more dark honey this year throughout the summer than usual. And she mentions the dark spring honey is from chestnut. I actually do have chestnut trees. Would you believe I planted some? Okay, anything else? Okay, then I have on that topic of how much do they eat at what temperature? Okay. I'm going to resume the slideshow. Okay, wait a minute. Now I have to get back to where I was. Here. Nope, that's the wrong one. Sorry. Wait a minute. That's it. Okay. This is metabolic rate is like how much feed they're guzzling down. So on
Are you
the
sharing slides,
Oh,
Eli?
it
Is that
didn't
what you
work.
want to be
Okay.
doing?
Okay, wait, it didn't do it, huh? Okay, let me get back to figure out how to share.
That's right. I was just like, picture this. It's like,
Yeah, you got a good, okay. Let me see. It said resume slideshow, but I didn't ask it to share again. Let me get to there. Share screen. And
now we got it.
okay, I don't really have to fuss with it then if you've got it. Okay, so on this slide in that upper right-hand corner, you've got this cluster formation thing. When the cluster actually forms in this area between, it's just starting to form. Okay, so 57 is what they tell you. So they did a little arrow up here to kind of indicate 57 is where it would actually start forming and be making the transition back and forth. What's interesting about this is I had to convert Celsius to Fahrenheit there. So I have those little extra numbers that I put in. The top row of degrees, -20 to 30 is Celsius. I had to translate that -4 Fahrenheit to 86 Fahrenheit. So bees are spending a lot of their energy on generating heat, except when they're super busy eating up everything because they're busy foraging and such and raising brood and everything. So when I look at this at -20, they use a lot of stores, but they use their lowest is when you hit, and it's about 45-ish, they say, that is their most efficient. If you really look at this, it's where it starts to get efficient on their use. They cluster together, they stop raising brood, hopefully, and then they're the most efficient use of their stores. Their metabolic rate falls. So with the insulated hives, what I'm waiting for Ty to find out is how much did they eat in stores?
Yeah.
With that weight change, Or did you hit the sweet spot somewhere and stay at that, what would be 45? This is ambient temperature, not inside the hive. They're talking about the ambient outside the hive temperature. And again, Tom Seeley was in on this. Tom Seeley was in on a lot of different studies. I mean, 50 years of beekeeping research, as Pat was saying.
Eli, are you putting the scales underneath? Because the scales will take the ambient temperature.
They do that. And then they also, Broodminder will also put in ambient temperature for you sometimes. I think you can click.
Yeah, it'll say a weather report, but that's
Yeah,
that's the Weather Service weather report, not under your hive.
that's not necessarily us. So this is what I'm interested in seeing, is what happens with Ty's hives. And I'll probably wrap at least lightly, and then my 2 inches styrofoam at the top with the moisture absorbency underneath. And then I want to see too, I want to see when the brood up happens, which again, they'll start guzzling their stores when they do this. The queen has to be kept at 68, 70, and then, well, this is funny. Oh, ambient temperature. Now they're not trying to maintain, but if they're trying to get the brood, then they have to, and then they get active again. Then they're going to be eating up for the brood. I don't know. It's just a fascinating topic. I don't think there's anything else that was interesting on my slides, and we probably hit 8 o'clock for people. Anybody have last minute questions? I know there are people that have to go. Anything else?
I wanted to mention something. I can't remember who did the, who was it? Where is it? Oh, I don't remember his name. I think he took off. But if anybody needs dew point stuff, if you look up psychometric chart on the internet, you can print up. That way you know where the dew point is and all that good stuff. Because that's what I do is HVAC. So I don't know if that's important for somebody, but I thought I'd mention it so you could look up the chart.
So Ty, do you have a plan for how you get dew point?
I just check the weather. I just pull it off of Big Sky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes we say things in 2 different ways. Yeah, dew point. But humidity, remember, bees have to have 50 to 80% humidity whenever they have brood in the hive, because the brood is open and wet and has to stay wet.
No, that's fine. It's just saying if you can maintain the temperature, you can sustain a higher humidity.
And they could continue to have brood and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe you don't want that, because then there's no brood break, and then you've got more varroa trouble. And they know that, and it's actually been finally mentioned by researchers, that varroa is worse in the northern climates, which doesn't make sense because we should have a brood break.
Well, we will try different things and see what we learn.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
And of course, there is dew point calculators. You can put in the humidity and the temperature and actually calculate it as needed. But
yeah, the nice.
I like
nice
Ty's
thing,
system.
I'd only trust them with a grain of salt, though. I mean, it's like
the nice thing about the psychometric chart is it says, well, if the hive has this much moisture in it, what is my temperature? And then you can cross-reference. Like if you have those 2 pieces of information, you can get 10 more pieces of information about what's inside the hive off of those 2 things. So it's great information, and it's more than you'll ever need, but that's stuff I deal with every day because moisture is what traps in the heat. If you have too much moisture, it gets hot and muggy. You pull out more moisture, it gets cooler inside. So anyhow, Eli, I found your
the process of cooling the moist air actually pulls the moisture out of the air, because it's the condensate that comes out of the AC units.
Bye, Randy.
Pulling out moisture is how you control your heat or your air conditioning. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's a great science.
Before we go any further, there's the heat of the cluster inside the cluster. There's the temperature outside the hives. And when the cluster pulls together, it doesn't heat the entire hive. So you're talking generally about the walls are basically ambient temperature. They're
Mhm.
basically the temperature outside the walls, just in case we're getting off here. They heat a little bit, but not, the bees don't heat the hive that much. Mainly they can control like humidity and ventilate if they don't have a lot of entrances and holes in the hive, like too much top entrance and as Tom Seeley's doing, no entrance at all at the top. And a lot of people, and it's a northern latitude, European, a lot of people don't believe in it. Ty's trying it without. I'm kind of iffy.
Okay.
I have that little notch, tiny opening there, partly because I don't trust myself to check in late January and find out that all the bees have decided to just en masse. All the summer bees have gone, whoop, died, blocked the front entrance, and I forgot to check for a couple of weeks. That's embarrassing. So that tiny little entrance up above does keep my mind at ease. So, but just so Mike catches that, we're still talking ambient temperature on the inside of pretty much on the inside of the walls.
Yeah, because it's what condensate hits the walls that's going to drip down. Is
Right.
what you're looking at. And let me see here. You're 8.3 miles away from me, so it'll only take me like 15, 20 minutes to get to your place.
Okay. Yeah. If you're, I just need that extra pair of hands. Yeah. That'll be fun.
Cool.
Oh no, feeding the bananas to the bees. This keeps coming up on the internet. Jen just posted. Okay. It says they posted about feeding bananas to bees. These things come up. And bees always take an interest in anything. I think this is pretty well debunked. Does anybody else have any thoughts about it? They can't handle indigestibles. Bees have a lot of starch. You wouldn't do it now, but even during the year, bees do take an interest and explore a lot of things. And we think some of it's micronutrients or something that they might be looking for.
One of the guys that does a YouTube, he was talking about, he puts bananas in his mite traps and his beetle traps.
Oh,
And the beetles just go nuts for the banana. Because he tried regular, the stuff that comes with the beetle traps, and then he tried a mixture of other things, and then he did just bananas, and the bananas was the overall winner.
yeah, beetle trap lures. That's one of the hardest things for people to find. There was something about palmitate. I think it's a kind of oil or something. And someone was talking about that worked really well, and somebody else had something else. I hope we don't have to worry about small hive beetle overwintering. It is showing up in nukes and such, and that's to be expected. And I think even a package they can ride along in a package. I think especially the adults. Nukes would be the worst though. Everybody's always worried. We saw grain beetles in our pollen patties this year, but not small hive beetle for me, but a number of people have said they're showing up quickly. Somebody said on here that they just saw it show up quickly, right? Forget who, but or maybe that was last night. Okay. I can keep talking. I also have more slides if anybody wants to look at them, but you probably don't really. Now that I have a volunteer for tomorrow, do I also have a volunteer for, I need a journeyman person who's taking the Journeyman class really is dying to teach beginner, or maybe find somebody to co-teach it with. Especially, I've already had to commit to January. People sign up months in advance for classes because it's so hard. I don't know why everybody makes it so hard. And Michael's being very wonderful about Eli does this and Eli does that, but actually, we shouldn't be the only club teaching beginner. I would like to see more beginner classes taught locally, where people are going to meet the people they are going to be beekeeping near, using the same bee supply stores, maybe getting their nukes and packages from the same people. I'd like to see that local networking happening too. And beginner classes are a lot of that. Every club should do beginner classes. It shouldn't just be me. So I'm, push. Okay. Heidi says she read this commentary on the bananas. Yeah. Use them on predatory wasps and hornets. Yeah, stuff that bees aren't highly attracted to, like fermented apple juices. So I could believe something like bananas. And then the cat food, the infamous ocean whitefish cat food or something that's supposed to be the one that's irresistible to yellow jackets at a certain time of the year. Yeah, I'm not above throwing a little slice of banana in there if it'll help increase it. But I've heard like fermented apple juice, fermented so that the bees don't go in. That's what you're hoping. You're hoping, boy, I wish I had done the trapping. But even if I'd done the trapping earlier, I just think it was such a bad year. And I had too many nukes. And they're too weak. Nukes are just attracting attention from yellow jackets.
It still comes down to bananas are just messy. They are, I don't know. I mean, the read was fun. I enjoyed the read. It was I thought it was funny, but bananas are still messy.
So they let him get good and slimy. And then, Tony has his banana plant right behind him. What do you must have to spritz that to keep the humidity up. You must have to spritz it daily to keep the humidity up. No? Okay. I've heard there are hardy bananas, so.
These are blue Java ice cream bananas because they taste like ice cream. And my greenhouse isn't completed yet, but it is 14 feet high. And once I get these bananas in there and get them in there in 12 to 18 months, I'm going to have bananas.
You and Paula have to get together and talk some more. I think you did once, because Paula raises all kinds of stuff and does all kinds of neat projects.
I loved it. Was she the one that has the apame also?
Paula, do you? I know you have Broodminder. I know you have the YouTube channel, Gapey's Grub. And then you do all kinds of things, starts and such. If you're on here. No, just Broodminder. Okay, so not the apame. Who had that? We have several people now in the club.
Because we had the trouble with the bees going up those in there. And of course, I drilled 3/8-inch holes after I had, this last spring, after I lost 2 colonies. They started there wasn't any food, pollen, honey, but they wouldn't go up. But now, for the last, couple of weeks, I've been feeding them with Ultra Bee, honey, and pollen that I collected, actual real pollen, and I mixed it up, and they're on it. They really like it. But the trick will be, and I think they will come up in the winter, because when I was using the Langstroth with 1/2-inch hardware cloth, the bees did come up, and I have lots of video footage of them just walking around and eating it, and at night, and so we'll see what happens.
Getting bees to come up when it gets really cold above the inner cover can be tricky. And so Tony was finding that this feeder that Apame had carefully designed, it needed one more little alteration and then they'd come up. And who thought of it? We need to write these things down.
Yeah, I've been taking pictures and I'll have to take video. I'm still trying to find a camera Wi-Fi camera that doesn't use these Chinese apps because they're terrible. I did have a nice one at one time, but it was a UHB, or excuse me, a USB. I don't know, but it was the one that it did fit my camera, but with the C, because I have a new Android, the app that they have is, I think it's it's something tracker. It's really terrible, but I think I can do a direct feed into my camera, and if I can just get the cable in there, I can do more videos, and it's really neat watching the bees walking around. I mean, this is at nighttime, and they're feeding all night. They're awake. They don't seem to go to sleep. At least the ones on top.
Yeah. Listening to your hives at night is really kind of fun. And like I said, still have 50-degree nights, night after night, or just under, like 48 or just above 51, hovering right there at 50 degrees. And they're entirely too active.
Yes.
This is where I wish it would freeze, because at least they'd stop moving around so much. Brood down, get a Varroa brood break, and then, yeah.
Oh, speaking of Varroa, second year beekeepers, I've been a mentee, and I was up there the other day, and one of our beekeepers was gone for a month, and they just got back about 4 days ago, and they had a dead out, and you can see all the dead bees around there, and I think they got robbed, and there's a big, a real super bee hive out of the 4. And we took the cover off, and she goes, "Oh, that's a mite." And it was on its back. And I said, "Take a picture of it." So I steadied it, and she took a picture of it, and I blew it. And then she sent me the picture last night or the night before. And there was 4 mites. I mean, there was a mite on 4 bees. That's how infested it was. And so she put in the oxalic acid, glycerin, Swedish sponges. The next morning, as expected, she had tons of dead mites, and so she's going to do a count on her journal and see how many. But all the bees, I figured all the hives are infested, I'm sure, because she didn't have anybody to help her. She didn't have any treatments on. So,
Well, you really can't take vacations at certain times of the year. And the mite zooming at this time of the year, what just happened, caught a lot of people. Although, as I told one person I was consoling her with, you did a wonderful thing managing to get, what was it? So it was several preteens and teenagers on a 5-week trip to Europe and came back sane. Everybody intact and had a good time. I said, if you lose your beehives because you were gone for 5 weeks on a once-in-a-lifetime trip for those kids, that's life, But 5 weeks at the critical time, yeah. It'll get you. They were fine when you left, and then you come back. But the viral load, too, they're probably gone no matter what she does. But why not try? Hey, why not try? If one of them makes it, one of them makes it.
yeah, I'll send you that picture if you like.
Yeah, I always collect pictures. Everybody, I collect pictures because we always need them. We need good examples of things.
Yeah.
And I forget to take the picture. Incidentally, does anybody have a picture of our booth at, the conference? And even a better one than I have at the fair. We don't have, I always forget to take the picture. 2 days at the conference and I didn't take a picture of the booth. I'm kind of hoping somebody has an accidental picture. I can't believe I totally forgot. I was so busy, like Michael says, schmoozing and doing the social butterfly thing and seeing people's faces that I've met on Zoom. That was kind of uplifting. That really was. I mean, I've adjusted a lot.
I didn't get back to you. I'm sorry, but I was busy with
Wait a minute, your volume's way down.
I was working on the 4-H equestrian program, so I was busy basically Friday through Monday, doing horses. So announcing and ringmaster and stuff like that. So that's why I was busy that whole weekend.
Oh yeah, a lot of people were, and I didn't expect it to be that good. Even after I saw the speaker list and went, "Oh, that's a lot better than usual." Yeah, it was. I think next year, if they keep up, if whatever Ruthie set in place works, but again, somebody still has to organize the speakers and do all that. But because she worked so hard on it this year, if they stay in the same place, maybe they'll get another person doing a really great job of that. Unless somebody volunteers another place. It would be nice to move the conference around, but it's just amazing it got going. Bye, Heidi. I know people have to.
Good night.
Night. See you tomorrow, Mike.
Up at 4. Bye.
Yep, bye. Okay. Bye,
How
Pat.
much of the varroa is introduced to the hive between the bees actually just intermingling with other hives versus actually bringing it in on a nuke or a package and not noticing it has it when you bring it in? You know?
You assume that you have varroa in every nuke, every packet, and every hive. So how much? That depends on your circumstances. Did the person who was making up the nukes and the packages ever actually treat them?
So obviously with every new nuke or package, you probably want to treat for varroa at least once in the beginning then.
That's what is now recommended. We're now hitting the point of we don't trust anybody to have really treated. And especially with the failure of Apivar. Apivar is the one that commercial beekeepers relied on the most in the United States and actually up in Canada, Ian Stepler up in Canada too. And it started massively failing last year. Resistance develops more easily to the manufactured, engineered. We manufacture oxalic acid, which is natural. It's the engineered, and they targeted a certain pathway inside of an organism. And when they make it that specific, it's very effective at first, but then it's also easier for those mechanisms to be evaded by a mutation somewhere along the line, a resistance, a selection for some of the organisms that were targeted actually evade because it's a specific mechanism. And that's why oxalic acid, formic acid, even HopGuard, the essential oils like thymol, it's not expected that those will ever really develop large-scale resistance. On the other hand, those are the organics. Organic always means a lot more effort, actually costs more, and a lot more time. And you have to monitor. You can't say I zapped it and that's the end of it, one dose. And you shouldn't be saying that, for example, on Apivar, but they were basically doing that. So I was going somewhere with this explanation that Apivar they over-relied on. So now the beekeepers who relied on it and it failed, people lost their nukes or packages because they trusted the commercial producer who said, I treated. Yeah, you may have treated, but did you monitor afterwards and see if the treatment worked? So actually, it's pretty much recommended now that if you're going to get nukes or packages, you either mix up the oxalic acid and sugar water spray and spray them even in the package before you put them into you install them into the hive, or you put them in the hive, give them a few days. Some people say a week might be good. And then again, drench them with what's called the dribble method or spraying onto each side of the frame. When you've just installed a nuke, it's really easy because it's only 5 frames and they haven't expanded much out from that to actually pick the frame up and spray it on both sides. And there's also the dribble method where you go down the seams between the frames and do that one. And then HopGuard that I dislike is the slimiest, messiest, awful stuff you will ever deal with. However, it is organic. It's mild enough that actually people use it on hives. You don't want to stress the queen or the colony too much. Again, organics are the softer treatments instead of the hard chemical treatments. And we haven't done varroa yet in beginner. Okay, that's coming up, right? Okay. Didn't I just ask you to Okay, right now I get really confused between the three classes because I am teaching Journeyman on Monday, Apprentice just started on Tuesday, and Thursday is beginner. And you all have a chapter on Varroa at different times. It isn't the same sequence. It's not done in the same order. So I get a little confused between them. And at some point, I usually send the entire lesson out to the wrong class. But people say, this is really interesting, but we're not in this class yet. So if that happens in the next, it's just for this week and next week that I'm teaching all three simultaneously. I think that's it. And then beginner ends and we're down to 2. And I don't get as confused. So we haven't done Varroa yet. That's done at the very end, next to the end. It should be this Thursday. And I should be sending you the lesson tonight, shouldn't I? Because that should have already gone out to you. Sorry, was doing the meeting. Okay, I will send out the outline and any attachments. And I'm pretty sure we're doing Varroa. I will double check. And then Pat's laughing because I'm always confused. I can't hear you, but I know you're laughing at me saying, yep, she's like that. But everybody enjoys a glimpse of what Journeyman actually looks like when they're a beginner and they get the wrong assignment. Here's your outline. I just like to think of it as a teaser. This is what you're going to experience later, if your instructor ever straightens out her schedule. Okay, anything else? I can talk lots of bees. Anybody wants to talk bees? I can talk.
I have a follow-up question from a couple weeks ago, Eli.
Okay.
I mentioned that I had one hive that, without having a queen loss, had kind of gone into its own natural brood break. And it had been my strongest hive. And when I went into it a couple weeks ago, it was only eggs, no capped brood. And for the last 3 or 4 weeks, they have not been taking liquid feed. And they have very, very little stores. They've gone through almost all of it.
Ew.
Do you have any idea what's going on?
But you saw the eggs.
Yeah, they had 3 frames back, like both sides of
Yeah.
eggs in a very nice pattern.
And what are you feeding them? And what feeder are you using?
I've doing 2 to 1, and I've tried buckets. I have everything in an attic. I've tried buckets with holes in the top. I've got it's one of the Man Lake like top feeders that's built into a box.
Oh, a tank. And then they come up
Yeah.
the center and there's a mesh that they're not supposed to go past.
Right. So
Up inside the screen and feed.
I've
Okay.
tried both of those and they won't take either one of them.
And you're sure that you cleaned it out, bleached it out, and put fresh in and it didn't ferment? Because if you keep
Yeah.
adding and adding, it ferments. So it's not that. And 2 to 1 usually isn't anyway. What's your
Yeah.
nighttime temperatures?
Upper
Think-
40s, low 50s.
Yeah, so you're where I am.
But that's just last 2 weeks. Before that it was higher. And they haven't been taking feed for a while.
That is weird. And your mite treatments are up, right?
Yeah.
You're up to date. And you monitored so that drop at least might drop or something. You monitor to make sure the treatments worked.
Yeah, they've had more mites than any of my other hives, but like I treated Saturday and I checked today and they were about 75. And I treated again
75 drop
On-
in how many
on the
days?
board.
So 75 post-treatment, how many days is that post-treatment?
4.
I don't know. How does that sound to everybody else? It's a little higher than I like to see, but if it never went higher than that,
It's been dropping.
oh, it was higher.
Yeah.
Ooh, Because that, yeah, if it got out of control, you may be looking at viruses or something. Any ideas on this? There are some strains that do brood down. I mean, carniolan and such. That's natural for them to brood down. But then seeing the eggs, and then if the workers go along and decide to remove the eggs because the stores are so low, if they're below 2 to 3 frames of capped honey, they automatically. When you say low on stores, how low?
They didn't have any capped honey. They had a whole bunch of pollen and
No
some
capped
like
honey?
uncapped honey nectar.
Oh, they start right away not raising brood as soon as they don't have 2 to 3 frames of capped honey. They don't have this insurance, this pantry, and they stop raising out brood because they're starving.
Yeah, but they're not taking feed.
That's really weird. That's why I'm going, I wonder if the virus has kicked in. Okay, Michael, pull me out of this here. I don't know.
I've only got feed on 2 hives and they're not taking it all either. And so they probably just don't need it. I mean, if they want it, if they need it, they'll take it.
But no
If they don't
stores.
need it, they usually don't.
If they don't have stores, if they don't have
Yeah.
capped honey in the hive, they're doomed.
Yeah, if they don't have capped honey, they should be taking it.
You could go to 1-to-1 and see if they take that. And like I said, bleach out everything and start over just in case it got fermented on you. Sometimes you added in feed on top of fermented feed. That's about all I could think of. And you empty them out. You can see the tank feeder. You can see if there's dead bees in there.
Yeah.
So it's not dead bees contaminating it, which would really be bad. They're just gone. I don't know why that hive is gone.
Hmm.
I'd say
Okay.
something's wrong with them that you can't see. And of course, you don't have any brood, so you can't look to see if the brood looks normal because you don't have any. Deformed wing, did you kind of look at their wings? Do you see any of them falling outside of the hive and front crawling around in the grass?
No, no, all the bees looked normal on them. I every time I go in, since I've been having high mites this late summer, fall, I've been looking close at the brood frames to see if there's any mites on the bees, and I haven't seen anything there. Um, there's normal activity for the size of hive going in and out.
You could do an alcohol wash and see if maybe you're just not seeing them and they're not coming out. When you say you did the mite treatments, what did you do?
I've been doing oxalic acid vaporization.
And you've been doing like 2 grams or more per deep. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And then how often, how far apart?
I've been doing monthly, and then the last 3 weeks trying to get up for winter, I've been doing weekly.
Wait a minute. You mean 1 dose per month?
I had through the summer, yeah.
That has no effect. I'm sorry. Does everybody else agree? That's like no effect at all. If it's such a soft treatment, oxalic acid, that even if you do the increased amount, that had no effect. So you have to do it like 3 times in a row, 5 to 7 days apart to have any effectiveness. It's such a soft treatment. So you're just getting started on it then if you just did 3 in a row.
Oh,
So you didn't treat for mites.
that's the
Basically,
perspective I've never heard before.
I don't.
I'd always heard that once was good.
I know. I cannot even imagine anyone saying that. And actually, if you even read the EPA labels where it's talking about 1 gram per deep, which everybody knows is way low and is not enough. Yeah, that's like nothing. That's like you didn't do anything.
Okay.
Bad information, huh? Sorry.
All
Late
right.
to tell you. Too late to tell you, but that's why the mite load on them is probably awful. If you do an alcohol wash, you might really get high numbers. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, they've got to be done every 4 to 7 days, 4 to 6 days, through the summer until your numbers are down. Where you might have heard the monthly thing is in the wintertime. So usually starting November, I'll be doing one treatment a month through the winter whenever I get a warm day that's over 50 degrees, so I know the cluster's loose. But you want your numbers down before September, late September, early October. So yeah, once a month is definitely not enough with OAV. So my guess is they're probably got a virus problem in the hive where the bees aren't accessing it then, if they haven't been treated.
So the others need treatment too. So if you can get it in, up it to that, and you'll hear everybody say a little bit different, like 4 to 6, 5 to 7 days apart. But especially when you're in a hurry, you would do them closer. And we're in a hurry now because everything's slowing down. Well, maybe you can't save that one, but you could save the other ones if you get
Yeah.
going on those.
The other ones are taking feed, like they're doing fine. So
They
hopefully-
haven't hit the critical downward spiral. And with mites, once they get loaded up with virus, there's this downward spiral that hits. And once it hits, it's called parasitic mite syndrome, which means you're doomed. And you could try to pull out of it, and you can kind of get the hive to limp along, but the damage is done. The fat bees didn't develop properly. Everybody's sick. Even the queen may have mites. It's too late. And oh boy.
Okay.
The once a month too during the winter, I have heard people say that, but and what you're thinking is you're just hitting the outside, the bees that are not tightly clustered if it's the absolute dead of winter. But even then, sometimes people are talking about a dribble. They're talking when they say once a month. Michael, are they always talking about OAV when they talk about once a month?
Yeah, and I've got to, I don't do it if it's below 50 degrees. It's got to be 50, 55. When we have one of those, rare days in the wintertime when we just have a nice warm day, then I usually go out and give everybody an OAV real quick. And I usually come out in the spring with 0 mites.
Mm-hmm.
So and again, they're nearly broodless through the winter. So one treatment, if the cluster is loose, it'll really knock them down effectively.
Or they have very little brood. And what I really want to get those brood minder sensors in, because the one that I got in, was it last year? They brooded up in the middle of January. At least that hive did. I mean, it was distinctive. It was clear cut. That's what they did. So now if I can get it into 10 hives and say 8 of them over winter, because I had some spotty brood patterns and such, so I'm not really going to count on all 10 making it. Usually I would, but I'm not going to count on that this year. But if I can get those in, I want to solve the question of when do they brood up again? When do they brood down? And when do they brood back up? If I can get those sensors in the correct place, because it confirms something that a lot of people have said. They know that their bees are brooding up in late January, early February. And I've always wondered.
Yeah, I had two last hives that I had to reverse, get the queens and the brood down in the bottom. I did day before yesterday. And I had 5 frames of cap brood and 3 frames of open brood on both of those hives. One of them was full of drones. There was no drone comb. They'd all hatched, but I would say there was probably 500 to 1,000 drones in that one hive still crawling around in there. The other hive was totally droneless, but that one was still, both of them were heavy on brood. Like I said, 5 frames of brood, cap brood, and 3 frames of open brood on those 2 hives. They were demerate hives when they started, so they were big hives that were getting pushed down.
Wow. But drones do go to the healthiest hive. So if one hive doesn't have any drones and the one close by has a bunch, it tells you where the good buffet is, I think. Once they get 3 or 4 days old and they can fly to the next hive.
Yeah, that might be it. They know where to find the groceries.
Mm-hmm. The most nurse bees with the most jelly that they're willing to give them, the special treats, because that's what they're really begging for, is they really want that jelly, not just bee bread or nectar. So I don't know, is it Tara or Tara? I feel bad telling you that. I had no idea. And wow. But you should be able to save, maybe save one of the other ones if you treat like crazy now.
Yeah, I will. I'll keep treating and
Yeah, why not? You have nothing to lose, and you have drawn comb.
Yeah.
And then if you start with brand new bees in the spring, that Megan Milbreth was trying to give guidelines on should you reuse the comb right away. I gotta admit, I'd like to wait a year and sort of let Nosema die down and any European foul brood. Sometimes when you have one thing, like a viral load, the bees are susceptible, just like people, you get a secondary infection. So you never know what else is in that comb, especially when like this, they're tanking on you. They're dying no matter what you do. Wow. And then when it gets too cold to take 2-to-1, if you think you can still kind of help that hive limp along, I have actually shifted back to 1-to-1 for a desperate hive. Because when it gets too cold to take 2-to-1, it won't flow. You can give them a little 1-to-1 and see if that helps them a little bit. But yeah, I think that one that's tanked is gone. I think it's the others that maybe you have a chance still.
okay. Yeah.
What else
I-
can you do? You got drawn comb, you've got experience, and if they tank and there's honey reserves, you've got honey for next year or honey to extract because none of these diseases affect people. The honey's still fine. And if you freeze, I would think that would help with European foul brood. I'm looking into that. I want some really good disinfection, and I want to make sure I go through that Megan Milbreth, what she was saying about the bleach and because people used to bleach their hives all the time. The frames, they dipped them, like especially down south where there's no real winter, there's no brood breaks and such. It was common to use a solution of lye or bleach or something else. Acetic acid is effective against nosema and probably some other things as well. The 80% type acetic acid, where you put it in wearing the full respirator, and not glacial. That I don't think they might sell glacial. Somebody actually said once that they ordered a glacial acetic acid without knowing what it was. They figure, glacial, it means it's frozen. No, it means it's highly concentrated, highly dangerous. And you should know what you're doing if you're receiving it. There is
Not a great consolation, but at least you are still walking away with the experience and the knowledge that you've learned from this one hive for the next years to come.
And you get the honey consolation. If you ever experience a dead out and you meet a beginner who experiences a dead out, hey, the consolation is you got honey. And if you want to go ahead and use it, at least you can console yourself with that. Okay, so Paula does them once a month too. She put in the chat. Okay, so there are people who do that. I wouldn't have thought of it. I would have thought only if you did drench or dribble, but if it's OAV. To store some, okay, James is putting a comment about what if you could feed the bees something that would be stored in the bee's fat body to get rid of the varroa without actually causing a problem to the bees themselves. It would be interesting.
If they could develop something that the bees could eat, it would store in the fat body that would actually take out the varroa.
It's toxic to the varroa, but
yeah, not the bees to cause interference.
Don't know. There could be something.
Yeah, it'd be nice if they could figure something out that would do that, though. That'd be a nice, easy way to feed the bees something and not have to deal with it.
Eli, Tony brought up you're still recording, so I don't know if
Should I go ahead because it's too long? It really is. This